Um, Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Steve Harvey. Um, Let me say this clearly because a lot of people get it wrong. Distance is not punishment. Distance is not manipulation. Distance is information. When you create the right kind of distance, you are not pushing a man away. You are giving him space to finally see what life feels like without full access to you. See, a man values what he has to work for, not what is always available, not what is always explaining, not what is always chasing clarity. When you're constantly present, constantly adjusting, constantly trying to hold things together, he never has to step up mentally. He gets comfort without commitment. And a man will stay exactly where he's comfortable. When you step back with dignity, when you stop over-giving and over-explaining, something shifts in his mind. He starts asking questions he never asked before. Or where did she go? Or why does it feel to feel different? Well, what happens if I actually lose her? That silence you create is not empty. It is loud in his head. Ladies and gentlemen, let me explain this the right way, because this is where most people misunderstand the entire idea. Distance is not rejection. Distance is not you walking away in anger. Distance is a boundary. And a boundary is simply a line that tells another person what is acceptable and what is not. When you create distance, you're not saying, I don't want you. You are saying, I will not accept confusion, inconsistency, or half effort. See, rejection pushes someone out emotionally. A boundary protects you emotionally. And there's a big difference. When you reject a man, his ego gets involved. He gets defensive. He gets defensive. He shuts down. But when you calmly create distance without drama, without speeches, without threats, you force him to think. And thinking is where truth lives. Most men don't reveal their real intentions when everything is easy. When you are always available, always understanding, always forgiving, a man never has to define where he stands. He can stay undecided and still enjoy the benefits of your presence. That's not because he's evil. It's because human nature takes the path of least resistance. If nothing is required, nothing is clarified. Distance interrupts that comfort. It removes the automatic access he had to you. And when access changes, value is questioned. He starts to notice what he no longer gets freely. Your time, your attention, your emotional support, your energy. And that absence creates a mirror. In that mirror, he sees his own effort or lack of it. A boundary does not yell. It does not argue. It does not demand promises. It simply says, this is how close you can come without commitment. And when a man hits that boundary, he has two choices. He either steps up or he steps away. That choice reveals everything you need to know. Here's the part that matters. Distance only works when it comes from self-respect, not manipulation. If you are creating distance to scare him, to test him, to play games, he will feel it. But when the distance comes from a genuine decision to protect your peace, it carries weight. It feels solid. It feels final. And that is what makes a man stop and evaluate. A man respects a woman who knows when to step back without collapsing emotionally. Because that tells him she is not desperate for validation. She is grounded. She has standards. She understands her worth. And men may ignore words, but they never ignore behavior. When you stop chasing clarity and allow silence to speak, the truth surfaces. If he values you, he will move toward the boundary with intention. If he doesn't, he will fade. Either way, the boundary saves you time, energy, and heartbreak. So understand this clearly. And anything that reveals truth is not rejection, that it's protection. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about why calm withdrawal is more powerful than emotional confrontation. Because this is where so many people lose their strength. When emotions run high, words get loud, explanations get long, and boundaries. And the more you try to convince someone to understand your value, the more you quietly lower it. See, confrontation is often driven by fear. Fear of losing the relationship. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of silence. So you explain yourself again and again, hoping that if you say it the right way, he will finally change. Here's the truth. A man does not change because of pressure. He changes because of realization. Emotional confrontation keeps him focused on your reaction instead of his behavior. He starts defending himself. justifying his actions, or promising change in the moment just to calm the situation. But nothing really shifts. The cycle repeats because the comfort remains intact. Calm withdrawal does something completely different. It removes the noise. No ultimatums. No ultimatums. No emotional speeches. Just a clear shift in your availability and energy. And that silence, it forces reflection. When there's no drama to distract him, he has to sit with his own actions. When you calmly pull back, you send a powerful message without saying a word. You communicate that your peace matters more than proving a point. You show that you are not attached to chaos. And that kind of emotional control is rare. Rare things are respected. Men are observant, even when they don't say much. He will notice the change in your tone. He will notice that you are no longer chasing reassurance. He will notice that you are no longer emotionally reacting to inconsistency. And that shift creates uncertainty, not about you, but about himself. He begins to your tolerance level. Calm, withdrawal also removes the reward for bad behavior. When someone knows they will still receive your time, affection, and emotional labor no matter what they do, there is no incentive to improve. But when access is reduced without hostility, effort suddenly becomes necessary. Here's the key difference. Confrontation asks for change. Withdrawal requires it. One relies on hope. The other relies on action, and men respond to action far more than words. This does not mean being cold or cruel. You can still be respectful. You can still be kind, but you are no longer emotionally overinvesting in someone who has not earned that level of access. And that balance is what shifts power. When a man realizes that he cannot argue his way back into comfort, he must decide. Step up with intention or step away completely. Either outcome is clarity. And clarity is always better than confusion. So remember this, peaceful distance creates space for truth. Emotional confrontation creates noise that hides it. And the strongest position you can ever take is not in what you say, but in what you say. But in what you calmly stop giving. Ladies and gentlemen, let's understand how healthy distance shifts a man's perception from seeing you as an option to seeing you as a future. Because this is where intention is born. When someone has unlimited access to you without responsibility, the mind naturally places them in the category of convenience. Not because they lack value, but because value is measured by what is required to maintain it. In the beginning is light. It's about connection, enjoyment, chemistry. But as time passes, a decision must be made. Either the relationship deepens with purpose or it stays in a comfortable gray area. And many men stay in that gray area as long as nothing forces them out of it. That's where healthy distance becomes essential. When you create distance rooted in self-respect, you change the structure of the relationship. We're no longer operating as someone who is simply present. You become someone whose presence must be earned. And earning changes everything. It activates effort, responsibility, and planning. It moves a man from reacting to you emotionally to thinking about you strategically. An option fits into free time. A future requires space in life. When you stop molding your schedule, emotions, and priorities around his uncertainty, he feels that shift. He realizes that if he wants access to you, he must make room for you in a meaningful way. Healthy distance also forces him to imagine life beyond the moment. He starts thinking ahead. Where is going? This is going. Can I afford to lose her? These are not questions he asks when everything is casual and convenient. These questions arise when he senses that you are no longer waiting indefinitely. There is another important part here. When you pull back with grace, you demonstrate emotional maturity. You show that you are not driven by fear of abandonment. And men who are thinking about marriage are looking for emotional stability, not constant reassurance. A woman who creates healthy distance is not disappearing. She is repositioning herself. She is shifting from availability to value, from being chosen by default to being chosen deliberately. And that distinction is critical. When a man begins to see you as his future, his behavior changes. He becomes more consistent, more protective, more intentional with his words and actions, not because you demanded it, but because he understands what is at stake. This is not about making him anxious. It's about making him aware. Awareness leads to respect. Respect leads to responsibility. And responsibility is the foundation of commitment. So understand this clearly. Healthy distance does not push away the right man. It activates him. It challenges him to rise to the level required to keep you in his life. And when a man rises willingly, not under pressure, that is when he stops seeing you as an option and starts seeing you as his future. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about why a man begins to think about marriage when he truly feels the cost of losing you. Because commitment is rarely triggered by comfort alone. Comfort keeps things steady. Loss creates urgency. And urgency forces a man to evaluate what actually matters. As long as you are fully present, emotionally available, and consistently supportive without clear direction, a man may enjoy the relationship without ever defining it. Not because he doesn't care, but because nothing has challenged him to decide. Humans don't assess value deeply until something is at risk. And for men especially, the idea of permanence often arrives through the fear of absence. When you step back with self-respect, you remove the assumption that you will always be there. And that assumption is powerful. Once it disappears, his mind begins to calculate. He starts weighing what life would look like without you. Your influence, your stability, your belief in him, the peace you brought into his daily routine. And suddenly, what felt normal begins to feel essential. This is where many women make a mistake. They try to explain their value through words, but a man does not feel loss through conversation. He feels it through experience, through quieter days, through less emotional support, through realizing that the person who once made life easy is no longer doing that work for him. Feeling the cost of loss is not about drama or threats. It's about absence being real. That's about your energy no longer filling the gaps you took for granted. And when that happens, his mind shifts from enjoyment to responsibility. Marriage is not just about love. It's about risk management. A man considers marriage when he believes that losing you would cost him more than committing to you. That calculation happens internally, and it cannot be rushed or forced. When a man begins to feel that loss, he doesn't just miss you. He begins to imagine the long-term impact. Who will stand by him? Who will bring order during chaos? Who will challenge him to grow while still offering support? These are not dating questions. These are marriage questions. And here's the important part. If stepping back causes him to disappear instead of step up, that is not failure. That is clarity. It tells you that he was enjoying access, not building a future. Distance didn't push him away. It exposed his limits. When a man is serious, loss sharpens his focus. He becomes intentional. He initiates conversations about the future. He introduces stability where there was uncertainty. He moves with purpose, not fear. So understand this truth. A man thinks about marriage when he realizes that the cost of losing you is greater than the fear of committing. And that realization only happens when your presence is no longer guaranteed. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get one thing straight, because this is where power really lives. Self-respect attracts commitment far more than availability ever will. Availability is easy. Self-respect is rare. And people, especially men, protect what is rare. When you are always available, always responding, always adjusting your needs to fit someone else's comfort, you may think you're showing love. But what you're actually showing is tolerance. Intolerance gets mistaken for permission. Permission to delay decisions. Permission to stay unclear. Permission to give you just enough to keep you around. Self-respect changes that entire dynamic. Self-respect says, I know what I bring, and I will not give it away without intention. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in what you allow, what you decline, and how you move when things don't align. A man does not commit to a woman because she is always there. He commits because he knows she won't always be there under the wrong conditions. That awareness creates accountability. It tells him that access to you is not automatic. It is earned and maintained. Self-respect is seen in how you handle inconsistency. Instead of questioning your worth, you adjust your proximity. Instead of begging for clarity, you step back into alignment with your standards. And that shift is felt immediately because it tells him you're not afraid to lose him. If losing him means keeping yourself. Men are drawn to women who have an inner structure, a woman who can be loving without being dependent, present without being desperate, caring without being consumed. That balance signals emotional maturity, and emotional maturity is essential for marriage. Availability without boundaries creates comfort. Comfort without growth leads to stagnation. But self-respect introduces consequence, not punishment. Consequence. And consequence forces intention. When a man insists that you will not compromise your values just to keep him, he starts to see you differently. He understands that being with you requires effort, consistency, and direction. And instead of feeling pressured, the right man feels inspired. Self-respect also removes confusion from your life. You stop trying to decode mixed signals. You stop overthinking silence. You stop negotiating basic effort because your standards do the talking for you. And when your standards speak, weak intentions go quiet. Here's the truth most people avoid. The man who is meant to commit will rise to self-respect. The man who only wants convenience will walk away, and both outcomes are wins. Because commitment built on self-respect lasts. Commitment built on unavailability fades. So remember this. You don't become wife material by doing more. You become wife material by requiring more. Not in demands, but in standards. Not in words, but in how you move. And when a man sees a woman who values herself enough to walk away from uncertainty, he understands something very clearly. This is not a woman to play with. This is a woman to build a future with. Ladies and gentlemen, let me leave you with something powerful, because this is the core of it all. Choosing yourself is the most attractive decision you will ever make. Not because it guarantees someone will stay, but because it guarantees you will not lose yourself trying to be chosen. When you choose yourself, you stop negotiating worth. You stop shrinking your needs to keep peace. You stop tolerating confusion just to avoid being alone. And that decision alone shifts the energy of every relationship. Because people can feel when you are grounded versus when you are grasping. A woman who chooses herself does not chase closure. She understands that clarity is revealed through behavior, not promises. She doesn't wait for someone to she watches how consistently they show up. And when that consistency isn't there, she doesn't argue with reality. She accepts it and adjusts her position. Choosing yourself also means letting go of the illusion of control. You cannot force a man to see your value. You cannot convince And you cannot love someone into commitment, but you can decide how much access they have to you while they figure themselves out. Now, when you choose yourself, you become emotionally sovereign. Your peace is no longer dependent on texts, calls, or validation. You enjoy connection, but you are not ruled by it. And that emotional independence is magnetic because it signals strength, not need. Men respect women who respect themselves, even if they don't always admit it out. When a man sees that you are willing to walk away from uncertainty with grace, he understands that being with you is a privilege, not a guarantee. And that understanding changes how he approaches you. Choosing yourself doesn't mean closing your heart. It means protecting. It means being open but not unguarded, loving but not losing yourself. And that balance is exactly what long-term partnership requires. Here's the truth. The right man is not scared off by your standards. He is guided by them. He feels safe knowing where you stand. He respects that you value your time, your energy, and your future. And that respect creates security. And if someone leaves when you choose yourself, that loss is not a punishment. It is alignment. It clears space for someone who does not need you to abandon yourself, to stay. So understand this deeply. You don't attract commitment by holding tighter. You attract it by standing firmer, by choosing yourself without anger, without bitterness, without fear. And when you do, the man who is meant to see you as his wife will recognize it. Not because you asked him to, but because you, wife, made it undeniable.